All right. Hello and welcome to our very brief 15-minute extended disc webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on what all of us use all the time, every day. How to make those emails, phone calls, and virtual meetings less frustrating and more productive. My name is Christina Bowser, and I am the training director, had to look at my title, here at Extended Disc. And joining me today is my wonderful colleague, Amy Lipinski, senior trainer. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Christina.
So we, as always, with our 15-minute webinars, we'll be recording this. So if you missed any of this or you want to review it or share it, we'll be putting it on our YouTube channel, as well as our extendeddisc.org website. We love your questions. We may not get to them live, but go ahead and put them in the Q&A section, and I promise you we'll get to it as soon as the session is over. So I'm sure all of us personally have had experiences where we roll our eyes, we kind of do this, when those emails, fly back and forth and going nowhere fast. So how can this help us? So today, we're not going to give you answers. We're not going to give you hard rules to follow, but hopefully we'll give you some suggestions of things that you are already doing, but this just kind of reminds you to keep doing it and to do it consistently. So Amy, you want to take it away?
Yeah, of course. So as I'm thinking about those emails that are so frustrating, oftentimes we also think about it like, what's frustrating me about the email, right? Like that's where the frustration comes from. And it made me kind of smile thinking, gosh, I think my emails might frustrate some people at times too, right? Because I don't think about always that other person. Who am I emailing? And I think that's the whole spirit of our webinar today, is to remind us we really need to think about that other person and realize we might be driving them nuts, So when we have a D style and we know we might be having to email a D style or interact with them, make sure it's not a long and lengthy email, right? Sometimes I get emails from D styles and it's all in the subject line. So don't put a lot of details into your emails. They're not going to read it. They're only going to read the first couple of bullet points. So be succinct and make sure there's action orientation to it. What do you want them to do with this? What are you asking them for, right? And it's the same thing when you call them, because you need to be ready to go. They move and act and decide fast. So be ready with your questions, have answers prepared, make it brief. And if you have to meet virtually with the D style, just again, being respectful of their time. They are an active style looking to get results done. And so they value that time, because time is money, time is results, right? And so making sure you don't keep it any longer than you need to keep them. Being respectful and appreciative of their time as well, and being clear and brief in what you need to communicate with them. Anything you might add, Christina, with our D-style communication tips?
No, D-style, but I think it's so true. It's like we oftentimes think about what's frustrating for us. And for someone like myself who prefers a lot more detail or opportunities to chat, that's actually very natural and comforting to me, but can be very frustrating for somebody else. So I think that was a great point you brought up. So moving on to I styles, your I styles, when it comes to emails, any interaction with an I style is something that they look forward to, especially in these crazy times, right? But if you really want to kind of motivate that I style or speak the language of the I style, you want to make sure you don't overuse data and details. Focus more on positivity and friendliness. Keep it brief. They kind of will lose track. They might get diverted if the emails are too lengthy. And best of all, if you're going to send an email, or if you have the option of sending an email or making a phone call, pick up the phone. It's something that your I styles will prefer. When you're on the phone with them, you want to build in time to chat. You don't want to go right to, this is what I need from you. Just say, hey, how are you doing? Let them speak whenever you have the opportunity. And virtual meetings, love them because they're obviously opportunities for live interactions, which we have much fewer and far between right now. So if you want to really kind of energize that iStyle, remember live conversations. Pick up the phone, schedule a virtual meeting over the email. Anything you would add, Amy?
Yeah, so as you're talking, Christina, I'm laughing because I work with a lot of clients who just flat out tell me like, but it's so frustrating, right? Like that's going to make me less productive doing that virtual meeting where they want to talk. And that might, again, be your natural inclination based on your style. Yet with our iStyles, taking that time to engage with them is really going to make them more productive and you're going to get more out of them. And so, again, that's the whole idea is how can we be more productive? And sometimes we think it's going to be counterintuitive because it takes more time, but in the end, it's going to save us that time. So when we look at our S styles, they are a little bit more formal and they're more reserved styles. So they are going to want the details. They will want some warmth in your email because they are a personable style. They're also going to be looking for clear direction, those details. And even if you do pick up the phone and talk with them, they probably will also want that kind of follow-up in writing because, again, they like the clear details. They want that structure and understanding of what it is that they need to do to execute on that plan or that, project, whatever it might be. And again, in virtual meetings, if you can make them, I think, a little bit smaller or one-on-one, you'll have more productivity out of an S style because they're all about that trust and rapport. So if there's too many people in a meeting, they might not speak up and ask their questions or voice an opinion. So if you're able to maybe get them a little bit in a smaller group or make sure you hear what they have to say, call on them, slow it down a bit because they're not going to be that active style to jump up and say, hey, I've got something to add, right? So we're going to want to make sure we get them included and give them a little bit of time to think about their response and what they would like to see or hear.
Yeah, I like the slow it down because for me, sometimes, we can't all sit there and think, oh, is this person a D, I, S, or C? I mean, as simple as that is. But sometimes if you think about what we always train, halves of the models, your active versus reserved, your active styles like the D and I's versus your more reserved styles like the S and when I get to the C, pacing is a great way to kind of differentiate those halves. Your D's and I's like to move at a much brisker pace. And your S's and C's, they want more details and they want you to move at a slower pace. So moving on to our C styles. With C styles prefer emails. You heard Amy talking about how certain styles prefer the live interactions, the phones and the virtual meetings, but your C styles prefer emails. Why? Because now they have time to process the information. And it also keeps it much more formal, which is something that the C style naturally prefers. It doesn't mean that they don't like people, but they are a more task-oriented style. So they prefer to focus on the task. And make sure, this is just a silly tip, but a tip nevertheless, make sure that when you send your emails to the C style, you answer their questions carefully if you're responding. You check for errors. That's something that most of us don't think about. Check your grammar, check for punctuation, because sometimes your C styles will get very fixated on that and it's very difficult for them to move on. So answer their questions, send it in detail, Keep it logical. Phone, not their preference. But however, if you do need to call, make sure that you have all the information, because they're probably going to ask you questions. And best of all, prepare them. Don't just call out of the blue with your C styles. That's not something that is comfortable for them. So give them pre-call information. Send them an email ahead of time. This is what I would like to discuss with you. And then give them opportunities to write their notes down, and also give them ways to be able to ask questions and find out more information later. Virtual meetings, just like the phone call, are not as comfortable. They tend to be quieter. But again, give them pre-call information. Know that they're going to be quieter, so that, you know, we're not like, are you okay? Do you have any questions? What can you tell me? They're writing it down. They're processing the information, and then give them that time to answer questions. And really, with this information, I just want to remind you that we are focused on the pure styles, D, I, S, and C, but we are all complex human beings. You know, most of us are combinations of styles, and our experience and our knowledge and our attitudes and our skills all impact how we show up. But these are just things to remind us, in the end, just generally, hey, just be aware of my style, be aware of how styles are different than my own, and what could I do differently to get the best outcome.
And part of that is going into our 4 steps, right? Like, we need to also know how to identify what their style might be. We don't want to jump to any conclusions. It's more about that observing the patterns. What do we see in this person? How do they tend to show up? What's their pacing during the meeting as they speak? Oftentimes when we are in person, we talk about office spaces, right? Being a visual clue. And so this slide here just talks about voicemail greetings. That can also be a clue into what a person's disc style might be, or how they might leave you a message, right? Are they talkative? Are they kind of all over the place? Are they brief? Call me back. Or did they give you every single detail that you possibly need to know? And you're trying to write it all down. And so sometimes just those factors, as we are observing the patterns of behavior with the people we're interacting with, are going to give us clues on how we might adjust.
And then finally, we wanted to leave you guys with some tips. I swear these 15 minutes just fly by. But so tips and takeaways. As Amy said, if you know us, you know that we pound those 4 steps to effective interactions into your head every opportunity we have. And so always think about your own disc style. Think about the style of the other person. Consider it. And then based on that, which is step 4, the most critical piece is, what could I do differently? What simple, brief, and often temporary adjustments could I make? Should I add something a little more personable in my email? Should I give them opportunities to speak? Should I pick up the pace? So these are things that, you know, it takes us, literally seconds to think about. But if we made these types of adjustments, it would get us what we wanted out of that interaction. And sometimes we think, well, gosh, I'm a D style. Oh, I don't have time to add one more thing. I just want to get things done and get it done quickly, right? But oftentimes these kind of miscommunications, these miscues actually stretch out these interactions and make them much more frustrating. That if we just took that moment to say, hey, this is a C style. Okay, deep breath. I can do a more detailed email. And then it might only take one email versus emails flying back and forth. The thing that we always say is, when we're talking about these tips, remember, as you gather more information about that person, keep adjusting. Maybe you assume that, oh, this person's very chatty and talkative with me, must be an I style. So you start picking up the pace, or maybe you gloss over details, but oops, they weren't an I style. They were just a friendly S style. And by doing those kind of behavior modifications, you actually hurt the interaction. So don't jump to conclusions too quickly. Keep refining. And last, breathe. because oftentimes it gives us the action to a pause. It makes us think about what do we need to do so that I respond better, that I can control this interaction in a way that I get what I want out of it. Anything you would add, Amy?
I just think that, again, it all goes back to these adjustments, right? This is what's going to help us unknowingly be frustrating to other people that we're interacting with, and also to be more productive within ourselves and getting higher productivity out of those that we interact with. So I hope everybody got some great tips out of our short webinar today. Join us next week, Wednesday, January 20th. It'll be a little bit longer, 3 to 3:30 Central Time. And we'll be talking about don't let them get zoomed out. So it's a webinar designed specifically for facilitators, other trainers, and how we can help engage participants virtually. So hopefully we'll see everybody then.